You're all wondering how I'm going to get done in the next 14 minutes. I know. I'm not sure myself. It's not going to happen. But we're going to try. The text today is Psalm 130. And as you turn there, I want to pray and then start. Can everybody hear me? Okay. Lord, as we open your word, we pray for strength to understand your love for us, what it means to walk in your ways, to follow you. We thank you so much for this day. In Jesus' name, amen. If you remember, back in 2006, October, there was a really serious shooting that happened in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, the heart of Amish country. And there was a one-room schoolhouse, and a very bad man went into that schoolhouse, and with his guns he shot several people, very young people. And then he actually took his own life. And that was devastating for the country, as you know, a mass shooting is. But what was more memorable from that day, actually, was not even the shooting itself. It's what happened in the days and weeks to follow. A few memorable things were that it was an Amish community that had been struck in this shooting. I'm sure some of you remember this. It wasn't that long ago. But the very day that it happened, the Amish community, the women, took food to the widow of the man who had done this, to his children. They reached out, and it was an act of forgiveness. 6 days later, his funeral happened, and also 30 of the Amish community went to that funeral and stood there. And in fact, they formed a wall between all of the cameras, the paparazzi, and the actual funeral. And they hugged the widow and the children. They loved them. They forgave them. And in the weeks and months after, money was pouring in because they had lost 5 girls between the ages of 6 and 13. And there were hospital bills to pay for, and there were so many needs. And the Amish community took that money, some of that money, not all of it, because they needed some of it for their hospital bills. But they took some of that money and directed it towards the family of the widow and her children, because now they didn't have a father, they didn't have a husband. And the news of this went around the world. How could a community forgive a man who had done such bad things? It became worldwide, legendary, known. And a book was written about it. And even today, the mother of the guy that did this and the community are very, very close. The mother actually cares for one of the girls that was shot and now is disabled. She has seizures and she's in a wheelchair. She can't eat or breathe on her own. She cares for them. And in other cases with other shootings, they've gone down to those places and helped comfort and counsel people who have suffered tremendous loss. And the reason it's important to hear that story this morning is we don't have time to get into all the details of Psalm 130, but Psalm 130 is a psalm of forgiveness. The psalmist in that psalm says to the Lord, Lord, I need your help. I'm in a lot of trouble. I have a situation on my hands. Houston, we have a problem. And he cries out, he or she cries out to, we don't know who wrote the song, cries out to the Lord. But then immediately the psalmist says, oh wait, I left the oven on. I forgot to turn the heat down. We got to turn around and we got to go back. I forgot my belt at home and I forgot my suit. We're going to a wedding. He makes this prayer to the Lord and then he remembers, oh man, I forgot to do X, Y, and Z. My relationship with God is not perfect. I'm a sinner. I'm broken. And if you're anything like me, that is our tendency. We find ourselves in all kinds of situations where we need the Lord's help. And as soon as we offer our prayer, we remember that something is not right. We do not have our ducks in a row. We are sinful people. And how can we ask the Lord for his help if we don't have our act together, right? That's our tendency to think that way. That's why the message of forgiveness is so important in this psalm. Because as soon as the psalmist says, Lord, help me out, man, his mind goes to all the things he hasn't done. He hasn't done right. That time that I did this, or the way that I do that. Bad habits or bad things that he's done. That's where his mind goes. But as soon as his mind goes there, he remembers that God is a forgiving God. And if the Lord marked iniquities, no one could stand. Everyone would fall. And once he goes through that process, he comes out on the other side and he has his answer. And it's not that fantastic in some ways. It's not like the Lord saves him from every possible trouble. But he realizes, after making his case to the Lord and realizing that God is forgiving, a forgiving God, he realizes that all he can do is wait and watch and hope in the Lord. It's a long process. And that's a hard message to preach as a pastor. To tell you guys, you just need to wait a little bit longer. God's going to come through for you. Because I don't know how God's going to come through for you, but I know that he is. So I don't have a lot of specifics. All I can say is, all the scripture can say is, wait a little bit longer. Keep watching, keep waiting, keep hoping. But it's like in the process of praying, and this is really consistent with the rest of the Bible, God's peace comes down like a bird, like a dove at the baptism of Christ. Comes down and rests on us. And in the words of Philippians 4:7, that peace guards us. It becomes a guide for us and a guard for us. And that's what happens in prayer. And that's what happens with the psalmist. This is Psalm 130. Isaiah 26:3 says this so well. This is another passage, not the text of the sermon today. But Isaiah 26:3 says, you keep him or her in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on you, because he trusts in you. And so as we trust in the Lord and remember his forgiveness, our mind is able to stay on him. And then we're able to turn to each other and say, not only do I forgive you, but God is a forgiving God, and you should try him out sometime. It's like a letter of recommendation, like a Yelp review. Hey, I tried this guy. He's good. It's good stuff. You should too. Because with the Lord is forgiveness, and love, and redemption. And I think we need to hear that this morning. Two reasons come to mind. One is, especially as we approach the table, the memory of God's forgiveness drives us, I think, to be forgiving people. If we really grasp it, like the Amish, we will be able to extend forgiveness immediately. Now, I've read a lot about this, and it's not to say that the Amish don't still feel bitter. Every day is hard for them. They lost their children. But they made a decision right off the bat to forgive. Now, we're not like God, so God can forgive instantaneously. He can do that. For us, it takes time. It's a process. But the lesson is the same. They extend forgiveness because they know forgiveness. Okay? So that's the first thing we need to know. And then the second thing is for prayer. Some of you will come on hard times and may be in hard times now and need to pray. Need to make your case to the Lord, right? You've got to do that. You've got to do that at some point. And your first thought, for many of you, like me, and I'm a pastor, I should know better, is, what about that one time I did that one thing? Or what about the way that I have a tendency to do this? Or, Lord, there's something that stands between me and God. And the message of the psalm is that it doesn't matter, because God forgives us. And if God marked iniquities, no one could stand. I'm going to close in prayer, and we're going to come to the table in a second. And as we do that, let's prepare our hearts to understand what it means that God is forgiven. This is a call to remember the character of God. What kind of God do we serve and love today? A God who is full of forgiveness, love, and redemption. Let's pray together. Lord, as we come to your table, a table which you've called us to celebrate the death of your Son through the offering of, or the extension of blood, and through grape juice, and flesh through bread. Lord, we remember the crucifixion and the death of Christ. Lord, help us to come with reverence and awe and love for you today. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Would the elders please come forward?